A few years ago, I heard a true story about a man in New York City who had been kidnapped, and the kidnappers called his wife and demanded a ransom of $100,000. She talked them down to $30,000. The story had a happy ending, not just that she had to pay less, but that he returned home unharmed. The money was recovered, and the kidnappers were caught and sent to jail. All fine and good, right? But don't you really wonder what happened when he went home and he found out that his wife got him back at a steep discount? You know? I mean, I can imagining this aloud, what the negotiations must have been like. $100,000 for that old guy? Hey, you got to be crazy. Just look at him. Look at that hairline and that gut. You mean, really, you want $100,000 for that? You've got to be kidding me. Give me a break here. $30,000 is my top offer. Now, I suppose that some of us here this morning might relate more to the wife in that story, but for some reason I relate more to the husband. And I would like to think that if I were in a similar situation, that there would be some people somewhere who would spare no expense to get me back. They wouldn't haggle over the price, It's just hurtful, They wouldn't say, well, let me think about it. I'd like to think that they would say, no, we would do anything for you. That's what we'd want. And the point of this story is, of course, that sometimes it's okay to be extravagant. What does extravagance look like when you're overwhelmed with gratitude? Let that sit with you for a second. What does extravagance look like in your life when you've been overwhelmed with gratitude? Think of moments in your life when you were overwhelmed by thanksgiving for the way things turned out or went, or for a relationship or a love that you have. Mine have twice taken place in hospitals. The obvious is holding a newborn Zachariah after a demanding birth. Aren't they all demanding births? A birth that arrived after months of waiting and sleepless nights of labor. Gratitude, speechless gratitude, holding this little life, shaped the hopes I had for all three of my boys. What does extravagance look like to you when you've been overcome with gratitude? It once happened in an unusual place, a courtroom in Ventura County Courthouse, where many of you go to serve out your jury duty service. An adoption proceedings was taking place. Many of you were in attendance. The judge who had overseen the case for Jake and Sam, two of my other sons, had been reassigned out of family court, and he was hearing like regular criminal court cases. But he wanted to know what had happened to these boys that he had been with over the years that he was overseeing that, so he postponed the trial that was supposed to take place in that jury room, which was a murder, and opened up the courtroom to us. The boys, social workers, and the gallery was filled with many of you. How many of you were there? Quite a few of you were there. Some of us can't remember that far back. There were a lot of Westlake at the time, New Hope Lutheran folks there, and my parents and family members. And the judge wept as he read slowly the entire document about what it means to take on the roles and responsibilities of your your new children. June Solberg, Mrs. Solberg, suggested a song was in order, the doxology. A doxology in a courtroom. I wonder if it has been publicly sung in that courtroom since. Gratitude, gratitude, singing, strong and loud. Such gratitude shaped my understanding of the value of community, shaped my future commitment to this congregation. What does extravagance look like when you are overcome with gratitude? The second hospital visit was at UCLA, Ronald Reagan Hospital, when Christine had brain surgery to remove a poorly placed brain tumor. Somewhere near the end of the surgery, the doctor came out, which is not a good sign, and because the surgery wasn't over yet, and cautiously said that the surgery was going well, but the tumor had wrapped itself around the right optic nerve. And he said that there were times that he had done far less manipulation to the optic nerve, and the patient was later completely blind. So he said he really couldn't tell or guarantee anything until she could confirm it. He wanted to be optimistic, but realistic. That didn't make us optimistic. The surgery ended, and we waited and prayed, and it took hours after the surgery until they could test her vision. And about 3 in the morning, a neurological ICU nurse came in to tell us the news that she could see with both eyes. Gratitude, sobbing, running nose, lying on the floor. Gratitude for what I had and worried I might have lost. It was gratitude that shaped the future difficult road of recovery. How does gratitude shape us? What extravagance takes place when we are overcome by gratitude? Final autobiographical story, you can think about your own. It's a less happy ending than these, of course, so you don't think that everything always works out the way that we had hoped for it. And yet, there can be gratitude. In the back aisle of my parents' home church, the church that I grew up in, the church that I came to faith in, standing in the presence of my father with my mother's nephews and nieces in a line behind us, my brother and I spread the funeral pall across my mother's casket as we awaited the procession. The cross in crimson lined up the length of the casket holding my mother's body. The crossbar of that cross lined up at what would have been certainly across her chest. We stopped under those windows. Do I have this? Do I have it there? There's those windows. I forgot to go forward. Sorry, Joe. We stopped under these windows. Those are the actual windows of the church. You can see the story. We stopped under those towering windows. Death, resurrection, post-resurrection appearance. I whispered a prayer. It went something like this. Now we have to let go of everything and just trust in what they say you've done. And I looked up at those windows that I had looked up all my life. And I said something like, so we're counting on your promises. I concluded and moved back with my father as we walked forward in the funeral service of my mother, the pastor reciting a psalm of gratitude and assurance. What did gratitude look like? Complicated and sober. Appreciative and sad. Connected, love, and dumbstruck by the oddity that I would never see this person the way I remembered her ever again. Gratitude. Holy wonder. Faith through tears. Such gratitude stood upon the ground that faith had built in that place, and it called me to trust farther. Lean into him more. You have your own stories. What does extravagance look like when you're overcome with gratitude? In our gospel reading today, it's ripped out of its context, so we kind of lose the importance of it. But we meet again these two sisters and their brother. We meet again Mary and Martha. Our gospel reading is John chapter 12. It's just a few verses after John chapter 11, where we hear the main character of the story is Lazarus. He's the main character because he's dead. But now, Jesus, the resurrection and the life, came to call the dead to life, and so Lazarus is sitting at the table ready to eat. Martha, of course, is serving, and Mary, of course, is at the feet of Jesus. The three postures we always see these three in. Lazarus lives, feasting at the table. Martha's serving. Mary is kneeling. But this time not to listen or to learn from the teacher Jesus, to perform an act of extravagant generosity, gratitude overflowing. It looked like that. The story says that the perfume, we can only imagine that Pastor Scott's perfume cost this much, 300 days' wages. What would 300 days' worth of your wages look like? A new Lexus. Mary apparently is a saver, and she has chosen this moment to splurge. She decides to spend it all, this costly ointment, on the feet of Jesus. This is spikenard, typically imported in alabaster boxes, stone boxes, from India or Nepal or China. Now imagine days without Amazon shipping. There was no Prime here. Even getting these things themselves cost a whole lot. It was a luxury item. Where she gets this and why, we have no idea. It ought to shock us that she would do this and spend this oil in this way, as it did the disciples, especially Judas, that she splurges in this way, giving away, wiping away such costly oil. There are just so many ways to turn this particular story and find important lessons for our lives. The season of Lent, we're looking at ways to flourish. What does it mean to flourish in our spiritual lives? Our theme today is express your gratitude. I hope you've noticed, at least in my own autobiographical stories, how gratitude shaped the future in every case. Future hopes. Gratitude shaping the meaning of community and a commitment to it. Opening up the importance of health, appreciation of life, and of faith. In the story of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, Jesus identifies this act as one that's shaping his future. Did you notice it? His death. His own sacrifice of love. He said this, "It was intended that she would save this perfume for the day of my burial." I'm sure that was just as shocking as the fact that she was on her knees performing this act, wiping his feet with her hair. She seems to initiate something in this act. Jesus' journey towards Jerusalem and the cross. But wait, before we get to the cross, there's going to be another story that lies in parallel in this one, in the same Gospel of John. It will unfold the last night, the night of his betrayal. Remember it? Jesus himself will kneel before his disciples. Just one chapter later, folks, it's not very far in our Bible readings. He kneels before the disciples, takes their feet into his own hands, and washes them. I wonder if Jesus, which is like only a week later, I wonder if Jesus still had the smell of that perfume on his feet that Mary extravagantly bathed on him as he sat down, and I imagine crisscross applesauce, that's their legs across. And that smell, that aroma, the fragrance that filled that room that day is still on him. This act of love, this adoration of him, this love that shaped his life, this love that shaped his future. Love shapes lives. That's why we must be very intentional about it. That's why we must be very planned about how we do it and making sure we're not missing the opportunities to shape people's lives with love. I wonder if he remembered that as he takes this intimate act of washing of feet and does it for his own disciples. I wonder if it's what prompted him, that smell. Smells are great reminders. You smell a certain smell and it takes you right where it was. That if he didn't smell that when he said this in John 13, "I have set you an example now that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you, no servant is greater than the master, nor is the messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." And a few verses later in chapter 13, verse 34, I give you a new commandment, to love one another. As I have loved you, so too you must love one another. By this everyone will know. Will they smell it? Will they see it? Everyone you will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. In his act of extravagant love, Jesus is shaping their future. Notice it? I've washed your feet. Now you do it too. I've done this act of love. Now you do it too. In his extravagant love for us all, on the death and resurrection of Christ, in his cross and resurrection, he's shaped even our lives. And he continues to shape the future of all humanity by his example. An example perhaps he's emulating himself from the extravagant generosity, act of generosity he experiences from Mary. The power of gratitude has many benefits for shaping our lives. You can Google that and find all kinds of Psychology Today articles that would be probably mostly beneficial. The power of gratitude shapes our futures. And we don't take that seriously enough. I think it's a practice that we as Christians ought to engage in each day to, become mindful of all the gifts that we have because we overlook them. We only remember them like in the big stories that I told you at the beginning, a birth of a child, a life threatened, the death of someone we love. Why is it the big things? Because we're mindful then. But maybe we should be practicing our mindfulness each day so that we can shape a brighter future for everyone and a more positive life for ourselves. It's a practice we should engage in to shape our relationships with others, to renew our stewardship of the gifts that we receive from others, from life, from the whole world. Gratitude can help us to remember to hold things lightly and to let things go for more important things. As Scott said this morning, there's lots of things that are important, but nothing like relationships. And to let go so that we can embrace the new things that all of our other scriptures seem to be calling us to this morning. That we can embrace the new things that God is leading us toward. And as we move into Holy Week, we are remembering Jesus' passion. We hear Jesus, even in little slight shades in our gospel reading today, speaking of his intention to let go of his own life at Jerusalem on the cross. We're all walking in this pattern. This narrative is our life. The common human path of the passion. Suffering, dying, rising. It's the pattern of our lives. In order to experience resurrection, we too must die. Now, that's terrible news, isn't it? Didn't come to church to hear that stark reality this morning. But it's good news too, and it's good news for this, because that the only thing that we stand to lose when we let go of stuff is the false self that we've propped up with false promises, which isn't really real anyways. And the only thing that's really passing away is this crusty old thing that eventually won't be of any use anyways. Lent, then, is a time for us to take seriously the realities of our lives and to practice small ways in which we die and rise, so that when these bigger things come, we'll know how to let go of that which is no longer necessary. It's time to learn obedience in and through the things that we suffer, and not to see suffering as some kind of punishment from God or from coming from somewhere else, but to embrace it as one of the gifts of life itself, and to ask it to teach us what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, to let go, to lean in, and to trust him more, and to find gratitude even in that letting go, allowing gratitude to shape whatever future may come. And if you want to flourish, we've got to learn to express our gratitude even in the letting goes. Our honoring of Jesus, it's probably not going to involve spikenard. Does anybody own any spikenard perfume? I looked it up. It's $45 for 1.7 ounces on Amazon Prime, which you can get for free shipping right there from Nepal. You could be prepared. I don't think it's probably going to involve that, is it? It might not even involve money at all. But in an act itself that fills the house, I love that phrase, an act that will fill the house, maybe church, with a certain fragrance. Is it the fragrance of love? Is it the fragrance of devotion? Is it the fragrance of gratitude for the one who has loved us so lavishly in such a costly, costly way? His own death and resurrection. 300 denarii, can't even touch it. 300 days' wages. You know, the guy who betrayed him got that for 1/10 of the price. 30 pieces of silver. How do you honor and say thanks to someone who has saved your brother's life? How do you say thanks to someone who saved yours? The one who gave his life so that your future is safe and shaped by an act of ultimate and eternal hope. Mary's gift was costly and extravagant, lavish. So she was overcome with joy, and it acted out extravagantly. You know what? One of the things that I pray about, especially for us, Northern European Lutherans, is that we don't underdo it. You know what I mean? That we don't underdo it when we seek to honor Him in our lives this Lent and always. Jesus brought life into Mary's world of death, and she was grateful, and she was extravagant, and she was shockingly lavish. And now it's our time to shape our future and flourish with gratitude for Jesus, for His love and the future that His sacrifice of love has given to us. With Mary, may we kneel at the feet of Jesus, wherever we find Him, in the poor, in the needy, in friend and in stranger, in joy and in sorrow, in plenty and in want. To be able to recognize Him in places like that, we must come to Mary's realization of her great hope in Jesus, her great need for Him, the fact that she would need Him every hour. And so we're going to sing, I Need Thee Every Hour. We're going to dust one off. This might be from the Methodist hymnal even.